The only reason this balanced approach isn't on its way to becoming law right now is because a significant number of Republicans in Congress are insisting on a different approach, a cuts-only approach, an approach that doesn't ask the wealthiest Americans or biggest corporations to contribute anything at all.
That was the president addressing the nation just minutes ago. This is our special MSNBC live coverage of the president's address and the response to the president's address by House Speaker John Boehner. Joining me now, Republican Congressman and Tea Party caucus member Joe Walsh. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, Congressman.
Great to be with you, Lawrence.
Congressman, the president said we're left with a stalemate. John Boehner said there is no stalemate. How could the speaker say there is no stalemate?
There is a stalemate. And again, it should come as no surprise that I was disappointed in the president's speech. But let me comment directly upon it. It was interesting. He mentioned these two approaches, and I agree with him on this. Most of the Republican caucus does believe we need to cut spending, pure and simple. And the biggest disappointment, Lawrence, I had in this speech was I don't think the president knows where large swaths of the American people are. I held 3 town halls this weekend, probably 400 to 500 people, and I would poll everybody in these town halls. And Lawrence, I come from a swing district, and by far the option that most Americans wanted, and it wasn't heck no, don't raise the debt ceiling. It was we know we have to raise it, but cut spending and reform the way Washington spends so we never get here again. I think that's where most Americans are, and I think that's why they sent us to Washington.
Well, Congressman, I can't argue with you on the views of your district, and certainly they must have views similar to yours since they voted for you, but we do have polling indicating that a very clear majority, not just of all Americans, not just of all Democrats, but a clear majority of Republican voters nationwide approve of the president's balanced approach that includes tax revenue increases through closing of egregious loopholes and other adjustments in the tax code. So let's not debate at that point what the American people want. The question is, where do we go from here? Let me ask you this question. Would you rather reduce deficits and interest rates by raising revenue from people who are not paying their fair share, like hedge fund managers who pay less than their secretaries, or would you rather accept larger budget deficits, higher interest rates, and higher unemployment?
Lawrence, again, a false choice, but it's an interesting one.
Congressman, I just want to stop you. I just want to stop you. When you consider your answer to this, that is the question that President Obama quoted in his speech, which was asked by Ronald Reagan, the single most important hero of the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan said he would rather increase tax revenues where they could in order to solve these kinds of problems.
Hey, Lawrence, it always slays me when this president quotes Ronald Reagan.
Because he agrees with Ronald Reagan, Congressman, and you don't.
Those two presidents, Lawrence, had two enormously different visions of this country. One president, President Reagan, Lawrence, got government out of the way and off the backs of the American people, and we enjoyed a 20 to 30-year growth period. This president, Lawrence, respectfully, has put the backs of government on top of the people. The American people are suffocating out there right now, Lawrence. You talk about the wealthy. The top 5% of the people in this country pay 60% of the taxes. For the first time in our history, we've got 51% of the American people that aren't paying any income taxes. Lawrence, our government is too big. We have a government that spends too much, and we're bankrupting future generations, and we're not going to change that until we change this town.
Congressman Walsh, you know that the government got bigger every year under the Reagan presidency, so much bigger every year under the Reagan presidency that Ronald Reagan had to ask you in Congress, you weren't there, but Congress, he had to ask Congress for a debt ceiling increase 18 times, and Congress gave him a debt ceiling increase 18 times. Would you have voted no on every one of the 18 Ronald Reagan debt ceiling increases?
Lawrence, I'll give you an honest answer. I don't know. What's interesting to me is...
So there might have been a debt ceiling increase that you would have voted for, just not an Obama debt ceiling increase.
No. 20 to 30 years ago, who knows? What I find really interesting is why, you're right in your history, why is the debt ceiling such a big issue now? And I guess my answer would be is because the crisis is so big, one. This president for 6 months has ignored the problem, two. And the American people sent people to Washington to no longer give this city a blank check. I would argue the American people finally woke up. You keep talking about this Tea Party movement, Lawrence. I think that movement is a lot bigger than your profession or actually either party understands.
So I'm going to put Congressman Joe Walsh down as a maybe on voting for the Reagan debt ceiling increases. Congressman Joe Walsh, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, Lawrence.